Өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Японы эрдэмтэн Waseda-гийн их сургуулийн профессор Fujimoto Takahiro гэж хүн оролцож байна. За энэ хүнтэй бид Японы үйлдвэрлэлийн шиний санаачлах чадварын тухай одоо юу хийж байгаа тухай сонин ярилцсан болно гэж найдаж байна.
Takahiro Fujimoto Японы Waseda-гийн их сургуулийн профессор. 1979 онд Токиогийн их сургуулийн эдийн засгийн бакалавр, 1989 онд Харвард их сургуулийг докторийн зэрэгтээ тус төгссөн. Эдийн засаг, бизнесийн удирдлага, технологи, үйл ажиллагааны менежментийн чиглэлээр голлон судалгаа хийдэг. Competing to be really good. Business architecture, strategic design of products, organizations, and processes, successful product development, the evolution of a manufacturing system at Toyota зэрэг номнуудыг бичжээ.
So good afternoon, Dr. Fujimoto. Thank you very much for coming to this interview online. I understand you are in Tokyo. I am in Ulaanbaatar, and this Zoom is giving good opportunity for us to talk about the very subject that you are mastering for many years since your study at the Harvard, and now you are teaching that the same profession many years. And I would like to start my question from such a questions like, what makes Japan to be always pioneer in almost all new innovation? Would you agree with that also?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. But for the first question, I tend to disagree with this. Japan is not good at all things. It's always a kind of design-based comparative advantage. No country is good at everything. Okay? It's not Olympic. It's more like sort of industrial game. And in that sense, Japan historically have tended to good at something integral, something complex, functionally and structurally, where there are lots of design parameters in the products. And if the relationships are very complicated, then we need a lot of coordination to design it and to produce it. And the high performance cars, small vehicles, are the typical example of such product, and we call it integral architecture products. There are other types of products, like digital products, internet products, or sort of software, application software, for example. These things are sort of living in a weight-free world, and electron is a major sort of driver of these things. And in this area where physical law is not the case, not important, we tend to see open architecture where the parts and components and other things are connected by standard interface. Okay? Silicon Valley is really the mecca, the really center of these kind of things, because America is a country of immigrants, and America grew very rapidly in the early 20th century by getting a lot of, like millions of immigrants. Actually, my grandfather was an immigrant to America himself. Okay? So by getting all these people and the massive flow of the labor force created this rapid growth in America. And actually, in an interesting sense, China has been growing similarly by the massive flow of the people in the rural areas. Okay, and so the result was kind of similar, but Japan was not a country of immigrants historically. So when we were growing in the later part of the 20th century, Japan had no choice but to grow with their own people. Okay, so we didn't have a chance to divide our sort of work into pieces. Okay, so everybody, like a soccer team, okay, everybody had to do more than two things. Okay, and we had to team up to do all the tasks. that were required because we couldn't rely on immigrants. Okay, so the result was very collaborative industrial society was made because of this history. Okay. Then we were naturally good at something coordination intensive. When the products need lots of design coordination or work coordination, then like automobile, okay, we tended to be good at that. If the product is coordination saving, okay, by using sort of a very smart standard interface, okay, these are the products that Americans were very good at. We like Silicon Valley. Look at Silicon Valley. We don't have a Silicon Valley, okay? And we were losing in semiconductors. We were losing in, for example, digital TV. Japan was a champion of analog TV because analog TV was integral, and we need a lot of coordination to make it. Okay, so Sony TV was a champion, but now the Japanese TV industry almost disappeared. Okay. Why? Because the TV became digital, flat panel. Okay. So when the product architecture changes, then their competitive advantage also changes. But there are always something which are relatively complex, relatively integral. And Japanese products of that type were always good at and they were competitive. So that's why Japanese manufacturing were not growing very rapidly in the past 30 years because of China's very enormous manufacturing power with low cost, low wage. Their wage was, 20 years ago, their wage was 1/20 of the Japanese. Okay, so there's no way to compete in cost. Okay, but these days, they are getting richer and their wage is now probably around one third of the Japanese. Okay. Then, and also there are pretty many factories which are over three times as productive as the Chinese factories. So now, some of them can compete in cost. Okay, so we are now getting into the new era when everybody can just compete in cost and design, and the Japanese companies still are competitive in the areas of interior architecture products like cars, complex industrial goods, industrial equipment, and electric components, functional chemical products, high functional sort of steels. In all these things, the Japanese are still exporting, so that the trade is still balanced between Japan and all over the world. That's the area where Japanese have been innovative. So we are not good at everything, but we were good at certain part of the industry. That's probably the question of answer of the first question.
Okay, what makes Japanese to be so competitive in cost and design? Is it competition, or is it particular attention to these details at the factory level, or it is industry level, where that competitiveness comes from?
Well, I think it's coming some part from the cultures, but mostly I think from their history, because Japan was not competitive in many areas, like including automobile, before the war, for example. But after the war, particularly in 1960s and 70s, certain products have become a very competitive product for the Japanese industry. Okay, so I think that mostly history matters. And again, as I said, Japan grew partly because of course, the Cold War. When China was not a factor, Japan was the only, in this North Asian area, Japan was the only sort of industrial countries half a century ago. Okay, and China was behind this wall of Cold War. So Japan had an opportunity to sell a lot of things to America and Europe and these advanced nations. Okay, and so this was a kind of historical luck, I think.
What is the culture part of it? Culture part
is many people say that Japanese are sort of group-oriented, collaboration-oriented, collaboration type sort of industrial society. That is well, partly true, partly true. That's why we are very good at the products that needs lots of teamwork and coordination of multi-skilled workers. So it's like a soccer team. We do offense, we do defense, and we do teamwork. So it's kind of a team soccer type sort of factories, which historically was developed in Japan. And of course, well, we had a history of long history of sort of collaboration, but also we had a lot of fighting. So, and also, as I said, before the war, most of those the industries which are competitive right now were not competitive before the war. So we cannot explain everything by culture. So yes, collaboration, collaborative culture, group-oriented culture is one factor, but I tend to de-emphasize that one.
Okay, how about the concept you have been promoting? You have issued several books in many languages about a concept called Monozukuri. What does it mean?
Monozukuri is, well, it's manufacturing, basically. In English, it is basically manufacturing or making things. Well, in Japanese, it's basically making things, but it has sort of special meanings. In a narrow sense, it means kind of, skill, okay, of the craftsman, for example, okay, making very precise things, okay. But this kind of sort of skills existing in maybe your country, China, America, and Germany, everywhere. Okay, so yes, this is one thing that the dexterity or the human skills to make something very precisely in the craft work, okay, like traditional craft work. That is very visual. So many of those media are focusing on these things. But well, if you're talking about the source of Japanese competitiveness, industrial competitiveness, I don't think this is the factor. The real factor is the monozukuri in a broad sense, manufacturing in a broad sense. And this means nothing but creating a good flow of value added. This is a kind of a very important concept of Mr. Taiichi Ono, who sort of created Toyota production system many years ago. And I met him and we discussed this. And then I was deeply convinced by his concept that flow of value added is the basis of industry. Okay, so if you create good flows of good value added, then you can make a good industry, competitive industry. And then, well, theories show that value added in economics resides in design information in engineering. Okay, so this is a connection of those things. So basically, to create good flows of good design information to the customers. Okay? This is manufacturing, monozukuri.
And you said that good design of manufacturing is mostly made on the floor of a plant, on the floor. First, it is made where the initial flow is. And then it is tested and it's returned back with more concise design, which makes this flow more or less flow.
Yeah, I think the reverse sort of steps. I think that the first thing is the design. Okay, to design things or to create design information, good design information. Okay, in the development centers. Okay, by engineers, product engineers. For example, in the case of cars, you have to start from product conception. Okay. To create a concept of the new products, the new cars, which can entertain people 3-4 years from now. That's one thing, the first thing. And then a basic design, and then detailed design, and then prototyping and testing, okay? And then production preparations by making dies and equipment and other things. And when all these design informations are ready, in the factories, and then production starts. Okay, and then when the production starts, this production still needs a lot of coordination. So this design activities needs a lot of design coordination, and then once you start production, this production also needs a lot of sort of work coordination. Okay, and then whenever coordination is important, we need a lot of coordination to be competitive, like cars. Japanese tend to be good at those things, and the Japanese products tend to be good.
You have been studying at the Harvard University, and what was the major lessons or takes you have taken from that study that helped you later on to implement in say Toyota, for example, management system?
Okay, I started my career not as academics, but I was a consultant when I was young, and then for some very complicated reasons, I was accepted at the Harvard Business School, and I did my studies under the supervision of Professor Kim Clark, who later became the dean of Harvard Business School. And my area was technology and operations management. Okay, so it is kind of somewhere in between engineering and economics and business. And then, well, at that time, Harvard had a tradition of sort of thinking about process and product, or in a sense, design and production at the same time. Don't separate those two things, because those two things are very intertwined source of industrial competitiveness. So this was a kind of big philosophy of Harvard at the time. So I learned that, and I focused when I was writing my doctoral thesis. I was focusing on product development, not production. Product development of the automobile industry. We were the first guys who sort of evaluated and the lead time and productivity of like 20-30 automobile product development projects in the world, including European companies, American companies, and Japanese companies. Okay, and then demonstrated that well, at that time, Japanese companies had at least design advantages in lead time and productivities, and that was coming from organizational capabilities in manufacturing, organizational capabilities in product development among the Japanese companies. Okay, then I realized that, oh, Japanese are good at those type of products. And then what type of products? That was our question later on. And we reached the concept of architecture. And well, the car is interior architecture. That's why Japanese were good at it. Okay? But Americans, Silicon Valley, and Chinese, they are good at something different. And they were very good at digital things, softwares, application, and internet things. Okay? Why? Because those things are modular architecture. Japanese are not good at modular architecture, but Japanese are good at integral architecture. That were the things that were we sort of found later on in the maybe 1990s. But I was studying at Harvard in 1980s. Okay, Japanese were so good at making and designing cars, particularly small cars. Okay, and then Americans was relatively speaking good at making trucks, SUVs, and other sort of pickup trucks. Okay, those things are more modular than small passenger cars. So the Japanese, Germans were good at the small passenger cars, and Americans were good at trucks. Okay, and so this can be explained well by this theory of architecture and architecture-based comparative advantage. So we thought that, okay, design matters. Okay, well, capability matters, of course. So that we looked at the capabilities of product development in 1980s at Harvard. But then in 1990s, when the Japanese started to lose in many things, including semiconductors and TVs, okay, we had to explain why this happened. Because Japanese cars were still okay. Okay, their global market share was about 30% in 1980. Right now, even their global market share is about 30%, including overseas production. So why these two very different things happened? in the industrial society in the world? That was my question. And my tentative answer was architecture matters and capability matters. And if capability and architecture fits, then you get comparative advantage. If those things are not fitting, then you lose.
How is it now reflected in Toyota management system today?
Today, I think, well, the basics are the same, I think, today and maybe 30, 40 years ago. Of course, now this is a world of digitization, so we need a lot of additional digital components, but to make good flows of good design information to the customers, this principle is not changed at all 40, 50 years ago and right now. So the question is how to create good flows in today's sort of technology world. Okay, so we have to use a lot of, for example, cyber physical system design twins, digital twins, robots, IAIs, and other things. And I'm looking at many Japanese factories introducing those things, but the way they introduce those things may be different between, for example, China and Japan. China is good at simple modular products and mass production, simple flow. Okay, so they tend to go for like a remote control smart factory, where people are not there in the first floor. I think the flow is very simple, and a lot of simple things are flowing. In the past, with many workers. Right now, with no workers. Okay, so that's Chinese way because they are good at modular products, simple modular products.
Japanese
look at the complicated products, interior products, and also complicated flow, where you need human being. Actually, the workers, the teams of multi-skilled workers on the first floor of the factories, together with AI, together with cyber physical systems, together with all digital things, robots and other things. Okay, so we need those new technologies, but always those things have to be with people because we are looking at very complicated flow of many products, different lot size, and many different sort of flows, sort of diverging, merging. So it's very difficult to control this kind of factories. Okay? So we believe that still we need people, workers, teams who really control those things. And
you talk digital tool. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Digital tool.
Yeah, digital tool. Well, of course, including sensors, robots, AI, or digital. Yes. So we're talking about smart factory. But probably in America and China, I think they will probably focus more on the remote controlled smart factories of making simple flows and mass production. Japanese will go for multi-product complex flow by probably collaborative smart factory. So again, we tend to be good at different things. So this will apply also to the next 10 years when we compete in the digital manufacturing. But the principle of making good flows of good design information to the factory.
So that's it.
To the factory and to customers. This is not changed at all.
Japan was good for particular products in 70s, 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. So with this concept, this complicated concept you are describing, mm-hmm. What will be competitive advantage of Japan, say, next 10 years, 20 years, in which products, in which industry?
Yeah, again, well, it can be anything. Because if you look at the TV, for example, we cannot say that we are good at TVs. We cannot say that we were not good at TVs because we were very good at TVs. We were exporting lots of TVs in the 1980s. And then they almost disappeared in 2000, okay, and 2010. Why? Because the TV is not TV. Okay, one was analog TV, which was integral. The other is flat panel digital TV, which was modular. Okay, when the product became modular, then the Japanese TV industry almost disappeared. Okay, so that means that we should look at again architecture. When architecture is integral, whatever it is, with Japanese and any other countries which have coordination oriented, okay, or teamwork oriented, have a chance to export something. Okay, so Japan is one case, but of course, some of the European countries like Germany have this kind of capabilities, and some part of like ASEAN countries like Thailand may have that kind of things. We are not just talking about Japan, but any countries which have teamwork-oriented capabilities, teamwork-oriented or collaborative industrial societies may have a chance to have export power in integral products, but probably in modular products, there are some other countries like China and America.
My question is, a small country like Mongolia with young population, after good training, say in digital industry, if there is any possible space to be a part of that development, obviously not whole value chain, but a particular part of this process. If there is any space, opportunity for a small country like Mongolia.
Yeah, I think, you need to have a very smart, strategic thinkers. And then we have to look at the whole evolution of the industry in now and 10 years from now and 20 years from now. And then probably, yes, population-wise, you are not big, so you have to focus on something, right? Japan is also not big compared with America and China and India. So we have to very focus on something. Probably one good example, maybe like Netherlands. Okay, Netherlands is of course, very strong country in the past, but it's relatively speaking small, okay, in population. And also they were good at like agricultural goods, but they were not so good at sort of high-tech manufacturing things. But then they created a strategy of focusing on a small part, but very, very important part of semiconductor manufacturing. Okay, and then they created this company called SML. Now SML is dominating, okay, dominating a part like lithography areas, okay, of semiconductor manufacturing. Without them, we cannot make advanced ones. So even America alone cannot make advanced the top end semiconductors without this Dutch company, without these Taiwanese companies. Okay, so if you have this kind of very focused strategies of creating a very important, technologically critical part, and in the Netherlands part of things, I think lots of the engineers and scientists were really focusing on this particular areas. Okay, so just focus on one important thing. That is probably the strategies for their relatively population-wise, relatively speaking, speaking, small countries.
What you are talking now is about R&D, research and development. And research and development, what makes this R&D more effective in any country? Is it a system at the universities or factories, or a particular policy to support them, some tax exemption? What is your policy position on that?
Everything that you said, I think, are important, I think. Particularly, I think, when you're talking about the R&D in industries, I think, the collaboration of the firms and the governments and the government-oriented R&D centers and universities, the collaboration is important. So that means that we need a platform where everybody get together And again, with the standard interface, we connected with each other and create something by open innovation. Okay, that is the very important areas. But at the same time, when you're talking about something very integral, what you need is a closed, very dense teamwork. Okay, probably you need both. You need both. Without this kind of dense teamwork, you cannot create something, for example, very important as a part, for example. Okay? But then if you fail in creating a standard interface by which your product can be connected to other products, okay, then your demand may be limited. The Japanese companies, many of them made these mistakes. Okay? They were good at making something integral by closed, very dense, teamwork-oriented R&D teams. Okay? They were strong in making like some small components and or some new material or new chemical products. Okay? But the Japanese were not good at creating sort of open global industrial standards. Okay, so those things are the things that Americans are very, very, very good at. Okay,
everything you create is to be for global market.
Not necessarily so. I mean, for some of the like service sectors, they are domestic, and some of the very sort of massive things that you need lots of transportation cost, you have to make that local. If you look at things like passenger cars, air conditioners, they tend to be produced locally. Okay, in China they are making a lot of them, locally, although they're not exporting a lot. Okay, well, but the small piece of high technology parts, for example, they tend to be produced somewhere and exported all over the world. So some of the products are trade-oriented. They are exported to the world. Okay? And the other products are more domestic-oriented. Bulky things tend to be more sort of domestic-oriented. So I think we have to, again, focus on some products which can be exported.
Okay. My final question is about what makes stronger university research and businesses connection?
Yeah, that's a sense of trust, I would say. And then, well, particularly this is a weak point of the Japanese companies. Japanese companies were competing very fiercely, not only internationally, but also internally, domestically. Then they tend to be fighting in competition. In product competition, you have to fight, of course. Otherwise, well, you will become weaker. Okay, so you need a domestic competition. Well, in any kind of sports, I think you need that, right? But at the same time, when, for example, you are in a mode of pre-competition, for example, creating standard, creating a platform, okay, creating a kind of collaborative sort of atmospheres where universities and firms and other sort of players sort of collaborating together to create something by some kind of open innovation. You need to have a kind of collaborative mind. Well, sort of, and the Japanese are good at the teamwork in closed areas within the company, but across the companies, they were always fighting. Okay, so we need this kind of collaborative sort of spirit, not only within the company, but also sometimes, sort of across the firms inside the industry and also across the industries. I think, of course, you need to compete anyway. I mean, this is the basic thing. You have to compete, but you don't have to always compete. Okay, there is a time when you collaborate, and there are some time you compete. Okay, yes. We need this kind of switch of the atmosphere.
Well, thank you so much for your interview, and it was so interesting to talk. And thank you very much again for the wonderful contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.
За хүн төлөвчтэй өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Waseda-гийн их сургуулийн профессор ноён Fujimoto оролцлоо. Баярлалаа.